Welcome to the Style Free Podcast, where a father and son detail and digress on a wide variety of topics within music, art, family, and culture. Your hosts are Professor Stephen J. Tyson Sr. and Jr., also known as Dad and Papo. In today's episode, we discuss the African and Indian influences in Black American music growing up in the 1960s and race and politics in America today.
It's good to be back with you again.
Yeah, likewise, Dad.
Talking about how music is part of the fabric of all of our lives. And as you know, that I love the DNA threads that connect different generations, even some different styles of music, of course. We're all one from my perspective. We're connected to the earth. We're connected to the cosmos. We're all, everything is connected. Mm-hmm. I think it fosters self-reflection, better communication, better understanding. And so I think it's all good all the way around. We had talked about some ideas, different themes, and that we could talk about. There are certain songs. I know we have a playlist that you had put together, and I certainly want to take a look at that. Like one of the songs that you have on your list is Bo Diddley. It's an incredible song, and I think it's the reason why it's incredible to me is because thinking about when that song came out, I think it came out in 1955 or so.
Yeah, between 55 and 58, he started recording, and then his first album was released on Chess Records in 58.
Yeah. So I was born in the midst of that, so I feel very much connected to that time. His beat, his boom, 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 boom. Now, in a way, that's kind of a clave beat. It's either, 2 and 3 or 3 and 2, right? So that Latin groove or connection there, I think, is really strong. That brings us back to people like Mario Bauza and Machito and Dizzy Gillespie and Chano Pozo, in the previous decade, the 40s, bringing that Latin flavor and bebop and innovation and all that stuff together, big band sound.
And it's all reconnecting just the strings that came off of various African musical cultures too.
That's exactly. It connects back to Africa. And so that strong presence, he's not Segovia. I mean, he's not trying to run the scales and everything. It's that beat. It's
and groove.
And that, yeah. It's hypnotic,
Yeah.
And then he's got that I guess it's a delay or something on it where it's
let's check it out real quick.
Okay. You're listening to it and you say, oh, well, it's very simple. But it's very powerful in its simplicity, in its apparent simplicity. The guy with the,
the maracas.
You have that in Latin music, right? And that also is like the shekere, and of course the drum, the beat. I mean, you just feel the beat, and that's one of the hallmarks of rock and roll is that beat. Whether it's a backbeat, I mean, I even hear that backbeat in Stevie Wonder's music, songs like That Girl or I Wish. That's why I always, as you know, I always like music that you can clap to. It's got that. We're all in this together. We're all, it's a church-like thing if you want, or a congregation of people coming together for a celebration. Did you also notice in his vocal delivery, you can see a connection to rap?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and different phrases and stuff that he was using. And first the last line of each line kind of rhymed. But beyond the simplistic rhyme scheme, there's, the cadence of it and how he was finding the pocket of the beat to put his words in.
Yes.
Really cool.
Yes. Yeah. No,
and also there's there has an island vibe too, and how he was playing the guitar as well. It reminded me of Hawaii or.
That's exactly. I was just going to say that wow, wow. You would hear.
And I was looking for a slide on his finger too to see if there was anything like that he was using, but I didn't see one.
That's a very good point, because the blues players, used to use that. They would use, the neck of a Coke bottle or something.
Yeah.
And I always wondered the connection between that and what the blues players were doing and the Hawaiian sound. I think Dick Dale and some other people used to play what they call surf music. What the connection is there.
Well, it's interesting. You think about like some of the Samoan and various like ethnic and indigenous island cultures and how there's still a direct connection.
The other thing that I heard when listening to that, for lack of a better term, Hawaiian or blues sound, I thought of, you mentioned Africa, I thought of King Sunny Ade, Juju music. One of the things that he has in some of his music is that kind of, has that Hawaiian flavor. So I think that's one of the things that he brought into high life Juju music, in West Africa. So it's one of the signature sounds of that classic, quote unquote, period. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
It's all connected. Yeah. You think about Jay-Z and other Timbaland, I should say, bringing the East Indian flavor. That was big for a while in hip hop, right?
Yeah. And like songs like Big Pimpin', or other, he had his solo album, or not solo because it was Timbaland and Magoo, but they'd put out an album where I think there was a song called Indian Carpet on it. There was definitely, for a while, a flavor of a lot of Indian music being sampled in hip hop. I mean, even Dr. Dre got into it whenever he did his song Addicted for Truth Hurts with Rakim. And it actually sampled, I think it was Lata Mangeshkar. She's a popular Bollywood singer throughout like the 70s and 80s, but she had a song called Toda Risham Lakda Hey, I think it's called. I'm not pronouncing it right probably, but that's the song that was sampled in Dr. Dre's production for Truth Hurts song.
Truth.
But then he ended up, but then that song got pulled from a lot of download services, or then now a lot of streaming services, because of copyright issues with how that played out. And, you can think about even with, another example of Rakim with Indian music being taken and sampled, but then running into copyright issues, is even the original version of Paid in Full had that sample of an Indian woman's voice in it that they ran into copyright issues. And so for years, the version of Paid in Full that you hear on the radio or whatever, it didn't have her voice in it. And so there's a deluxe version, I think, that was recently released in the past, sometime within the last 10 years or so, but has put that original version back into it. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of overlap between various Indian music too and hip hop.
Well, we can also look at how Indian music also, manifested itself in music of people like Miles Davis. You can go back to the Beatles, of course, and how George Harrison and, learned how to play the sitar and, studying with, I think it was Ravi Shankar. And then Miles then starts incorporating tabla drums and his music by the 70s. And it just takes off. In fact, when you listen to some of that music now that he was creating, you can see that global influence. He's got the African references, not that he had African musicians per se in his music. He did have an Indian musician playing the tablas and all that. But just the rhythm, the electric guitars, the fusion of the rock and the jazz, the trumpet, the improvisation, all of that stuff coming together was quite groundbreaking. And I mean, others had sort of played with certain aspects of that, but by force of personality and just all the weight of history and everything behind him, he was able to forge it ahead and bringing a lot of incredible people, the Keith Jarrett's, the Chick Coreas, rest in peace, and all these other incredible musicians, Gary Bartz and so on and so forth. So, and I'm wondering how many hip hop artists pay attention and they look to the jazz musicians who were, whether it's the Sun Ra's and the Miles Davises and others,
I think more than people would expect. And before I answer that question too, definitely you had mentioned Ravi Shankar and his connection with Miles as far as jazz and then just the lineage of blues and et cetera. And it's amazing how Ravi's daughter ended up in the jazz and blues world very heavily in Norah Jones. And so then how she was able to kind of take that and carry that forward in her music too.
That's true. That is true. Yeah.
But when it comes to, I guess, hip hop and thinking about its connection to jazz and some of those blues, I mean, definitely artists like Kendrick Lamar have been intentional in connecting with maybe not so much some of the earlier jazz, or I shouldn't say earlier, but pioneers, so to speak, in jazz, because one, a lot of those guys aren't alive anymore, but then, folks who are still alive, like, Herbie Hancock and folks he's definitely built a connection with, or, we were able to see his interviews and assume a then relationship and connection with Quincy Jones. And so, but he also has connection with, current folks like Kamasi Washington and Terrace Martin and Thundercat and, other folks who are definitely keeping a lot of that tradition alive right now, too. Then other folks like rest in peace to Mac Miller, who definitely had a appreciation and understanding of jazz and blues and its foundation for, everything that laid into what we know as hip hop today. And so, had he not passed, we would have been able to see a lot more of that coming from him, because he was definitely expressing that a lot more openly leading up into his passing. So,
yeah. I think that's all right, because I think then it becomes not, I mean, obviously there's a healthy competition and all of that. And you want to outdo and do better than, but you also really want to do your best, do what you can do, the best that you can do it. Some of the bebop guys, when they would look at Louis Armstrong initially, they didn't like his smiling and grinning and that sort of thing. And they felt that it was,
like Goonin.
They wanted, given the context of the times, coming out of World War II and, just this new way of thinking, about yourself and your presentation as an artist, not just an entertainer, not just you're an entertainer, but not just an entertainer, but you're an artist to be respected. It's about being respected. There was a bit of tension, but then they came to appreciate him much more because of what he was bringing in terms of his technique, his approach, how that opened up the doors. It comes with maturity, right?
Yeah.
When you get older, you start saying, you know what? Wow, yeah, well, I'm here, but he been there. He kind of opened up this space, so that I could come through and do me. So respect, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so they performed together. And then there's a great photograph of Miles. And from Louis Armstrong to Roy Eldridge to Dizzy Gillespie to Miles Davis. There's 1970, the year that I think Louis died that year. And Miles is there and they're talking. I think it's in Columbia Studios. There was a recording of some kind going on. And so a lot of the Columbia artists were there and Louis is there, and there's a couple of photographs of him looking serious and then smiling like Miles had said something funny, and they're both, having a moment. It's always good to see, to show that it's a community. It's a musical family.
Yeah.
And you don't always get along with, everybody in the family, or there's all kinds of situations that'll come up. But at the end of the day, you can come back and acknowledge and say, hey, one way or the other, we're still all connected.
Absolutely.
Now I know you have some other songs up there.
Yeah. Here, let's check out Earth, Wind, Fire Sunday Morning.
Yeah. Man, that's a great song. I mean, well produced. The sound is like classic Earth, Wind, and Fire. I mean, what I call the horns, the writing, the way in which the song is structured.
Yeah. It takes you in different places throughout it.
Yeah.
And it's like the guitar solo it has its own separate energy almost from like the rest of the song too.
And yet it's all connected,
Yeah.
That's what I mean. That exemplifies, this idea of the different textures and things that different musical instruments like individuals, bring to a situation, and how it can be shaped into something that's beautiful. And the content of it is something that is uplifting, which makes it even that much better.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Indian music and all of that. You can hear Indian music in Earth, Wind, and Fire's music on some of their recordings. I think Power Light. I think it was Zakir Hussain who was the tabla player. that recorded with them. And I think Zakir also played with Miles Davis as well. And Earth, Wind and Fire was one of Miles Davis's favorite bands.
Wow.
One of his favorite bands, you know.
Wow.
He said, man, they get down. They get down. And Maurice, he knew I'm coming out of Memphis, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talk about the blues. I mean, he knew the blues. You know, he knew gospel, you know, sang in the choir. You know, he and Verdine, you know, are also brothers. They had different fathers. But the point is that regardless, they're still brothers. There's also Fred White, who played the drums in the original Earth, Wind and Fire. Like
the first iteration.
Well, there was the first iteration was before Philip Bailey but Verdine was always there from the beginning. When they had the Salty Peppers, then the Salty Peppers, you know, became the first iteration of Earth, Wind and Fire. Then by 1972, Last Days in Time, I think, then you get the Philip Bailey and all the rest.
And then by the time Sunday Morning comes out, Sonny Emery's on drums at this point.
Sonny Emery's on drums. And you saw also on drums, or maybe it was timbales, I'm not sure exactly what he was playing, was Ralph Johnson.
Yeah. And Philip Bailey was playing some percussion too.
And he was playing, that's right, always played congas. So they had the Latin connection there. They used to play with Santana, you know, for a period of time. And if you think about songs like Evil, which was classic, I think it was on the Head to the Sky album. That was big. We used to listen to that in high school, man. You know, running through our brain. Da, 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 da. Oh man, the way that song I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. And it had that Latin groove, you know?
Yeah, very much so. It's like that's one of those songs. It's almost like a train going down a track. It's just not stopping. It's just
Exactly. And I think that's an important point, because we talked about the Latin present, Machito and Dizzy and all these folks. But even in the earliest days of jazz, they had what Wynton Marsalis calls the Latin tinge in music coming out of New Orleans and other places, because, you know, you have the Spanish, you have the French, you have the African. It's a stew. It's a melting pot of a lot of different sounds coming out of there. And so I think it's important, particularly in this day and age when, you know, Latinos, Latinx are becoming a significant number of Latinos in this country are changing. There are more Latinos, I believe, than even African Americans. But there is also Afro Latinos, people who identify with their African roots and that connection and so forth. And that's manifesting itself in music, as it did with the Boogaloo, the original Boogaloo in the 60s. And it was kind of a fusion because it had English lyrics. Often we had English lyrics with Latin and soul grooves. Then you think about people like the Isley Brothers, who brought a lot of energy and different sounds from different cultural experiences, you know, into their music. They had the church, they had a little bit of Latin or African related grooves in their music. I mean, it just goes on and on. And I think that the reason I'm kind of harping on the Latin part is because this is a time, I think, where people can get easily divided. There's always been, well, if you're Latino, you're supposed to look a certain kind of way. You know, I remember, depending on what your complexion was, that determined your status, that the color thing played itself out in Latin culture, as it did, you know, with the paper bag.
The brown paper bag test and all that.
Yeah.
How did that affect you then? Also, like being Black and Puerto Rican, being Afro-Latino, and then by proxy, then me being also Afro-Latino.
Yeah, having that connection. I think that, first of all, I just embraced all of that. We grew up, you know, listening to the charanga of Johnny Pacheco, you know, and we would see our relatives who lived in Spanish Harlem. And my mother, I never saw her as anything but, you know, my mother. I never thought about she you know, Black or, you know, Latina, you know, I mean, yes, a Puerto Rican and all of that, but I never thought of her in respect to color. What came through was the heart, you know, the intellect, the heart, all of that, and that sense of family, You hear it today whenever we get together, and it's at Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever. There's always that moment where she makes a statement. And what does she always remind us of? Your generation, the younger ones, Ricky and all of that, to love each other.
Yeah.
Love, as Grandpa would say, love everybody.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you always have to like everybody.
Right.
But you respect them as human beings, you love them as human beings, And it's that ethos that carried through. So I never thought about that. I just embraced the Spanish rice and, going to a Radiante, restaurant on Southern Boulevard in the South Bronx.
Yeah. And then also having the opportunity also to grow up in New York too, in a place that's so diverse, it lessens the thought about there being, something askew or an anomaly or something different about, having a Puerto Rican mother and a Afro-Caribbean father.
Yeah. You're absolutely right about that. And I would say also that the public school system that I went to also reinforced that, because we had kids from all over the Bronx.
Yeah.
And when I went to music and art, forget about it. The music and art was like the United Nations. I mean, everybody from every walk of life, basically. Chinese, American, Latino, Black, Southern, Caribbean, European, Eastern European roots, Russian roots, whatever. All of that was there. It was they say melting pot or a fabric or a salad or whatever.
Right.
But we never thought about that. We just embraced this is normal. This is normal.
And then what would it then feel like in the context of then Martin getting killed or Malcolm getting killed or the Black Panthers coming up, and like knowing that there's definitely these inter and even at times intra-racial tensions going on? It couldn't have always felt, I guess, like a space of utopia.
No, it didn't. It's as if life interjected itself into that space, but growing up in that space kind of fortified us to be able to deal with those kind of situations when they did occur. See, I remember March of 1968 when I went to Hunter College to see Martin Luther King speak. And it was supported by 1199, which was a union, which had a lot of hospital workers and the like, many different workers. And having that energy of his presence, being there and speaking to us, bringing us together toward something better for all of us. Definitely coming from the Black perspective, but also ultimately bringing us all together. He didn't like everybody, I'm sure, that he encountered,
Right.
But as a human being at the core, I believe he felt that there was something that could be redeemed within the individual. Even if you disliked or vehemently disliked, whether it's their politics or their attitude or the way they came at you, that sort of thing, that behind all of that there was something there, and you couldn't kill that deeper essence or love within yourself in order to fight that.
Yeah.
You had to fight with love.
Yeah.
To take it on that way. So we were fortified, I believe, that way. Now, is it easy to do that? Was it always like, this person said that, so I just accept them and
right, just keep turning the other cheek.
Yeah, when you come up in New York, it's not so easy to do that. You know what I mean? Because people don't always give you that space or that grace. But I think you do the best that you can, and you stand where you are. You stand in your truth. And I think if you're honest with yourself at the end of the day, I mean, you can't control every situation, but you can control how you respond to the situation.
Very much so.
Yeah. So then 2 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks later, he's assassinated. I have the radio on because I'm usually listening to WABC. I'm listening to WMCA, Home of the Good Guys. I'm listening to WWRL, Super 16, all of this music. And it's interrupted to say that we have this report that Martin Luther King's been killed in Memphis, Tennessee. I thought he said Memphis. I never heard of Memphis. I wasn't, wasn't in my head.
And you were 12, or like 11, 12 at this point.
Oh, going on 12, yeah.
Yeah.
So I called your grandmother. And she came in. I said, Mom, I just heard on the radio. She said, What? Oh my God, no. And she just burst into tears. I mean, she was crying. And I hadn't seen her that way since I remember when we were sent home, when John Kennedy was killed 5 years earlier. And they sent us home from school. School was canceled. And they sent us home from elementary schools, PS 36 in the Bronx. And she was crying. Her eyes were red, and just, to live through that, then Bobby Kennedy and Malcolm. I remember when Malcolm was killed, but I wasn't paying as much attention to him at that time. But we had some friends who had just moved in around the time that he was assassinated. They were Muslims, Black Muslims, quote unquote, from the Nation of Islam. And he ran a store in Harlem for the Nation. And so he had his kids and they moved into Skyview, and he had a huge green Cadillac or was it what was the name of that car that the Green Hornets car was based on?
1966 Chrysler Imperial Crown sedan.
Chrysler Imperial. Okay. Yeah. So they had a car like that. But it was green. It was like a darkish green color.
Yeah.
But to circle back to your how did I respond to the situation when people would come up? So Martin is killed, and I go to my school. I'm going to the Fieldston School, right? The elementary, the lowest school. Gil Scott Heron at that time was in the upper school at the time, but I never encountered him. That would have been interesting. And I wore. Your grandmother made us wear a black armband as a sign of respect. In the old days, whenever somebody, a family member, something like would die, you'd wear a black armband. Did you know that?
Vaguely. I thought it might have been like a military thing or something like that. I don't know where it came from.
Maybe it was. I don't know. But that's what
I think I'd seen it symbolically at some point when I was way younger.
Yeah. So I went to the school. I had the black armband, and this guy named Philip, a friend of mine. I mean, I thought he was a friend of mine. He was white, and as was most of the school anyway. He looked at my armband and he said, "Why are you wearing that?" I said, "Well, Martin Luther King was killed." He said, "Oh yeah, I heard about that. Oh, look at me, I'm shot." So I went and I punched him in his chest.
Yeah.
And I was upset, and people held back. He said, "What'd you do that for?" They pulled us apart. And then later on, I think he apologized or something like that, But it was at that moment that I realized there's sort of a disconnect, a separation. We used to listen to songs. I don't know if we had the album. I think it was written by the Mighty Sparrow, and it was called Martin Luther King for President. And we used to listen to that. He says, "Martin Luther King for President. Martin Luther King for President." And he's got a part of the song where he has a spoken word type part. And then he goes into, "And we want Martin Luther King." Great song. And then that's what we listen to in our home.
Yeah.
And the people who ran for, Black folk who ran for president, I don't, a lot of people don't know that Well, maybe, I don't know, this generation doesn't know that Shirley Chisholm, ran for president, that Dick Gregory ran for president, that, Al Sharpton ran for president.
Mm-hmm. Jesse Jackson.
Jesse Jackson, of course, ran for president.
Frederick Douglass ran for vice president with a woman as the presidential nominee on the ticket.
And when you think about what happened and how all that stuff, the possibilities of what could have been before Andrew Johnson created that compromise that basically ended Reconstruction and all those black senators and everything that was going on.
And there's actually just posted on Facebook today too. You should check it out because they even talk about a lot of the black senators and stuff and what happened to them and how different militias, even in Georgia, went in and just killed them. Basically, like what was going to happen on January 6th.
Exactly. There you go. There's no way to whitewash what happened this past January. I mean, it was an insurrection that was premeditated. And now look what's happening in Georgia. All these laws and oppressive ways to prevent people from voting.
Right.
The whole idea of the vote, that your vote is just as powerful as somebody else's vote. To disenfranchise and roll back the clock and prevent that is, if you want it in a very constitutional way, is un-American.
Yeah.
So anyway, the point is that Martin was appreciated and loved and respected in our home. And for somebody to do this who happened to be white, I think in my mind, it was like, you don't get it. You don't get it,
Right.
You don't get it because if you were black, you would understand what this meant, what this means to us, that kind of thing. But it did upset me, Everybody's different. This goes back to what we were talking about, how we kind of started out talking about the DNA of music, finding the influences in music.
Yeah. Finding
the folk rhythms that was the basis of say classical music. And how the folk music, where that came from, and the similarity and resonances that has with folk music in other places around the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
That if you can sort of get past the layers and see where things do connect on that other level.
Yeah, the foundational level.
Yeah. Then you think about human beings, just how we interact with each other. How can we get past the constructs that we've created that separate us out, as opposed to identifying the things that we have in common that we can build on.
Yeah, most definitely.